On the Ides of March 44 BC, Gaius Julius Caesar, the dictator for life, walked into the Roman Senate. He was arguably the most powerful man in the world, a military genius who had conquered Gaul and defeated his main rivals in a brutal civil war. He was a champion of the people, a brilliant speaker, and a man whose ambition seemed to know no bounds. As he sat down, a group of senators, men he saw as colleagues, friends, even enemies he had pardoned, crowded around him, daggers hidden under their togas. What happened next is one of history's most infamous assassinations, 23 stab wounds. While ancient sources say only one of those wounds was fatal, the result was the same. The life of a titan was over. The assassins, calling themselves the liberators, thought they were saving the Republic from a tyrant. They believed they were putting an end to one-man rule. They were wrong. When the liberators killed Julius Caesar, they thought they had put an end to his ambition. In reality, they had just launched his greatest campaign. They killed the man, but in doing so, they created a power vacuum. And into that void, something new would rush in, a power that seemed to come from beyond this world. In death, Caesar would get his ultimate victory. He would become a god. This is the story of the greatest propaganda campaign in Roman history, how the dictator Julius Caesar was transformed into the divine Julius, a god of the Roman state, and how his ghost would come to rule the largest empire the world had ever seen. Caesar's murder didn't restore the Republic, it shattered it. The aftermath wasn't a return to the old ways, but a terrifying spiral into chaos. The liberators, led by Brutus and Cassius, had a plan to kill Caesar, but they had no real plan for what to do next. They expected the Senate and the Roman people to celebrate them as heroes. Instead, they were met with a stunned, fearful silence that quickly soured into pure rage. Rome was a powder keg ready to blow. The city's people, many of whom loved Caesar and had benefited from his reforms, were horrified. Contemporary sources describe a city in shock, a chaotic vortex of panic and anger. Caesar's body lay where it fell in the theatre of Pompey for some time before it was finally retrieved by slaves and taken home. For his public funeral in the Roman Forum, his loyal co-consul Mark Antony delivered a masterful eulogy. He didn't have to invent the crowd's outrage, he just had to channel it. Antony read from Caesar's will, revealing that the dictator had left his private gardens to the public and a large sum of money to every Roman citizen. This didn't sound like a tyrant, it sounded like a loving father. Then Antony held up Caesar's blood-soaked toga, pointing to the rips and tears made by the assassin's daggers. The effect was electric. According to historians, the crowd erupted. In a frenzy of grief and fury, they seized Caesar's body. They wouldn't let their hero be carried off for a normal burial. Instead, right there in the heart of the Forum, the sacred center of Roman life, they built a makeshift funeral pyre from wooden benches and stalls. As the flames shot into the Roman sky, they weren't just burning a man's body, they were burning the last scraps of the old republic. The people then put up a simple column and an altar on the spot, a place of spontaneous worship that terrified the elite senators. This raw, popular emotion was the fertile ground where a legend would grow. Into this power vacuum stepped two main players. First was Mark Antony, the experienced general who saw himself as Caesar's natural successor. The second was a total unknown, a teenager who wasn't even in Rome when it all went down. His name was Gaius Octavius, Caesar's 18-year-old grandnephew. In his will, Caesar had adopted the boy as his son and named him his main heir. When he accepted, he became Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. He was young, untested, and looked down on by seasoned politicians like Antony. But what he lacked in experience, he made up for with a chilling political genius, and a name that was now the most valuable currency in Rome, Caesar. A brutal propaganda war was about to begin, and the prize was the soul of Rome. Making a mortal man into a god wasn't a totally new idea in the ancient world, especially in the East, where kings had long been linked to divinity. But for the deeply conservative Roman Republic, it was a radical, even dangerous concept. While Caesar himself might have flirted with divine honors in his lifetime, his official transformation into Divus Iulius, the divine Julius, was a masterpiece of posthumous political engineering. It was a calculated process that used religion, spectacle, and mass media to legitimize a new autocratic order. And it began not with a law, but with a sign. 4 months after the assassination in July of 44 BC, Octavian hosted the Ludi Victoriae Caesaris, the victory games of Caesar. These were lavish public games that Caesar himself had planned, now being put on by his young heir. It was a brilliant political move. It allowed Octavian to publicly honor his new father and introduce himself to the Roman people. During these games, a brilliant celestial object appeared in the sky. Ancient writers described a bright hair star, what we now call a comet, that shone for 7 straight days. To the Romans gathered in the city, it was a miracle. This was Caesar's comet, also known as the Julian star. Modern astronomers have hypothesized that it may have been exceptionally bright, perhaps one of the brightest daylight comets in recorded history. For a population already grieving and stirred into a religious frenzy, this felt like undeniable proof. The timing was just too perfect. This wasn't just a comet, it was the soul of Julius Caesar rising to take its place among the gods. This was the opening Octavian needed. He seized on this celestial event with incredible speed and skill. This wasn't just a popular belief anymore. He and his allies worked to make it official doctrine. As the poet Ovid later wrote, it was the goddess Venus herself who flew down, lifted the soul of her descendant from his broken body, and carried it to the heavens to kindle it as a star. Octavian immediately started weaving the Julian star into his personal brand. Statues of Caesar were commissioned, often shown with a star above their heads, creating a tangible link between the man and the divine sign. The message was simple but devastatingly effective. If Caesar is a god, then what does that make Octavian, his adopted son? The answer to that question would be stamped on the money of the Roman world. Ancient coins weren't just for buying things, they were the most effective form of mass media, a way for a ruler to project power to every corner of his territory. And Octavian used them masterfully. He started minting coins that would change Roman history. On one side, you'd see the deified Julius Caesar with the inscription *Divus Iulius*, the divine Julius. On the other side, a portrait of Octavian himself with a bold new title, Divi Filius, son of a god. This wasn't a vague claim, it was precise, legalistic, and politically explosive. He wasn't claiming to be a god himself, not yet. It was much cleverer. He was the son of a state-sanctioned god. On one hand, this was an act of public reverence for his father, which played well with Roman values. On the other, it was a political masterstroke. It elevated him above all his rivals. Antony could claim to be Caesar's loyal lieutenant, but he couldn't claim to be his son. Brutus and Cassius could claim to be liberators, but now they were also the murderers of a god. Only Octavian had this unique, almost sacred legitimacy. His authority, he was telling the world, didn't just come from the Senate or the army, it came from the heavens. Every time a soldier got paid, every time a merchant made a sale, they held a small piece of metal propaganda that reinforced Octavian's divine connection, but popular belief and clever branding weren't enough. To make Caesar a permanent god of the state, it took the one thing the assassins had fought to preserve, the authority of the Roman Senate. By 42 BC, the political landscape had changed dramatically. The liberators had been driven out of Italy, and Rome was controlled by a new ruling junta, the Second Triumvirate, made up of Octavian, Mark Antony, and Marcus Lepidus. Under immense political pressure, the Senate did what would have been unthinkable just 2 years earlier. They passed a formal decree recognizing Julius Caesar as a state divinity. This was the final, crucial piece of the puzzle. The Senate's decree turned popular emotion and spectacle into an official state cult. The worship of Divus Julius was no longer a fringe movement. It was woven into the fabric of Roman civic and religious life. The triumvirs authorized the construction of a temple in his honor, a project Octavian would see through to the end. Priests were appointed, festivals were added to the calendar, and sacrifices were made. Caesar had been institutionalized. His deification provided the perfect cultural and religious cover for what was, in effect, a slow-motion coup. On August 18, 29 BC, 13 years after the Senate's decree, Octavian, now the undisputed master of the Roman world, dedicated the temple of the deified Julius. It stood at the eastern end of the Roman Forum, built right on the spot where Caesar's body had been burned on that frantic, fiery night. The temple was a magnificent marble structure, but it was more than just a place of worship. It was the physical anchor of the new regime. Its placement was brilliant. It dominated the most important public space in Rome, a constant reminder of the Julian family's divine status. The front of its high platform was designed as a speaker's stage, the rostra ad divi Juli. When orators addressed the people, they did so from the steps of a god's temple. To further cement his own glory, Octavian decorated this rostrum with the bronze prows of warships captured from Antony and Cleopatra at the Battle of Actium. The temple was a monument to his divine father, but it was also a trophy case for his own victory. Inside, the temple held a colossal statue of Caesar, adorned with the famous Julian star. It also contained priceless works of art, including a famous painting of Venus, the mythical ancestor of the Julian clan, further tying the family's lineage to the gods. The temple and its rostrum were integrated into Rome's political life, a clear demonstration that the restored republic, as Octavian, now calling himself Augustus, called his new government, would operate under the divine patronage of his family. Caesar's deification was the blueprint. It set the precedent for what would become the imperial cult. After Caesar, the posthumous deification of an emperor became a regular, though not guaranteed, feature of imperial politics. A new emperor would have his predecessor declared a god by the Senate, which in turn sanctified his own reign and strengthened the dynastic claim. Tiberius would rule as the son of the divine Augustus, just as Augustus had ruled as the son of the divine Julius. This system was one of the key ideological pillars that supported the Roman Empire for centuries. It provided a common religious focus for a vast and diverse empire, a way for people from Britain to Syria to express loyalty to Rome through a shared ritual. For the Romans, divinity was as much a legal status as a spiritual one. To be declared divus was to be granted the ultimate promotion, integrating a great man into the state's official pantheon of gods. The soldier from a storied patrician family had, through ambition, genius, and bloodshed, climbed to the top of mortal power. But it was his death and the brilliant, cynical propaganda campaign that followed that allowed him to take the final step. The path to immortality was paved by a grieving mob lit by a convenient comet and legalized by a cowed Senate. It was a path forged not on the battlefield, but in the minds of the Roman people, a path that led from the bloody floor of the Senate to a pyre in the Forum and finally to a place among the eternal stars. The story of Caesar's deification is a powerful reminder of how narrative can shape reality. If you love these deep dives into the mechanics of history, please consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. It helps us continue to explore the hidden forces that have shaped our world. Julius Caesar was transformed from a murdered dictator into a Roman god through a potent mix of genuine popular grief, a timely celestial event, and a ruthless, politically engineered propaganda campaign. His ambitious heir, Octavian, masterfully used these elements, adopting the language of religion and family duty to legitimize a revolution. He built an empire on the ghost of a god, creating a dynasty that would last for centuries. The story is an eternal testament to the power of a good story, proving that what people believe to be true can be just as powerful as the truth itself. And it leaves us with a question just as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. How much of history is shaped not by events themselves, but by the stories we tell about them